Well, hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Richard, and anarchy is currently afoot at Lap the World headquarters. Clearly dissatisfied with the amount of disproportionate attention being lavished on her sister, the NSX, the Gallardo has now decided to rebel against me as well. In this version of throwing a few toys out of the crib, she has developed a bad passenger side window switch. So what we're going to do today is kind of a bonus video this week, is attempt to fix this ourselves before we resign ourselves to replacing, probably, fingers crossed, an Audi component in this little switchboard here, or mailing it off to have someone else fix it. So, my hope is this will be a demonstration or an illustration of how I'm able to have nice things. That is to say, not being afraid to work on them, and not just an exercise in futility, at the end of which I end up spending money. But with that said, I'm going to pull you guys inside here and show you what we're working with. So what we're dealing with here is kind of a standard issue switch panel. In the Gallardo, the controls are from left to right, driver's window up and down, headlights, fog lights, emergency flashers, traction control, fuel door release, and passenger side window control. And the passenger side window control is the one in our case that is busted. The down works just fine. The up, it started sort of not working, rather, in that the automatic up stopped working, and then after that the normal up stopped working unless you really kind of smushed it around, and then at this point it doesn't work at all no matter what I do to it. So, having done a little bit of reading, step one here is to literally just pull the switch panel out. And it does just pull out. You want to be a little bit careful because these the rubber or plasticized little cap things on these switches they will come off, and they are easy to lose. But you can kind of grab a hold of the base of some of the switches and wiggle a little bit, and then get some purchase once it comes out here, and then you literally pull it out. And then once it is out, you just have some felt back here that's doing I don't know what. Looks like it probably came off something else maybe, or is intended for sound deadening, but either way it's coming off, so we'll figure out where that's supposed to go and stick it back on. And then you just have two connectors back here that we will unplug, and then we'll take this thing into the other garage where I can see what I'm doing and crack it open. Okay, so having removed our switch panel from the car, we are back at the workbench of our discontent for another episode of How Things Can't Just Be Easy. From the front side, this thing looks in pretty good shape, honestly, but once we flip it over, it does not take a Concord judge eye to see that someone has probably futzed with this before. The wood screws are a dead giveaway if the little zip ties over here were not. Also, I don't know if you can hear that, but I don't think it's supposed to make that noise when you tilt it around. So, with that said, and now with much more trepidation than before, let's crack this thing open if we can, do so non-destructively, and take a look at what is inside. Point out that one of these screws was a Torx head, and the other one was a number 1 Phillips. So they're not even the same kind of fastener. Seriously, guys. Hate noises like that. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but this right here and this down here, that looks a lot like glue. So I'm gonna have to get extra creative here probably to get this thing separated without causing any undue carnage. That also explains why this felt was stuck on there, because that's some kind of glue right there. So that's going to be fun. All right, so that was touch and go for a second, but we do have everything apart now and have managed to not, for the most part, not destroy anything in the process. We have one little chip come out right here, but that is fortunately behind the threshold where this actually protrudes from the dash, so I'm not worried about it. That won't be seen at all once it's reassembled. But let me quickly talk about how this actually works now that I've had a chance to kind of look it over, and then we'll explain what went wrong. So starting at the front here, you have these switches themselves, and if you look inside them, there are little, you know, as you would expect, little rockers, and they have little fingers on one side or the other, depending on if it's the left or the right switch we're talking about. Those then actuate via these little springy clips right here. They actuate these little rockers, and these rockers have these little round fingers on them. And those are to click these buttons on the circuit board. Those are very satisfying to play with, but I think crucially, they actually take a little bit of force, more than you would think for their size, to make them click. Which is why it's important that the backing plate be firmly attached, because it is there and it serves a vital function in maintaining enough pressure on this circuit board, because this circuit board is not directly attached to this intermediate plate or the front fascia here. It is only attached by the clamping force of the backing plate being attached to the front switch panel. And that is where things have gone wrong in our case. This side, the driver's side, which is over here that was still working, is the side that was, as you can tell, glued and screwed together here. And I have a feeling that's because they somebody over-tightened and broke this little screw cavity nub off right here. I don't know what to call that thing, but that's what it is for now then. And then as you can see now, as I disassembled it this time, this screw nub also just fell off. So this was clearly disconnected, and this was the only thing that was holding pressure on this side of the board. So as I was clicking the up on this switch, the passenger window switch, and it was actuating its little lever, what was happening was, rather than it clicking a button, it was just pushing the circuit board instead of clicking the button, because there was not sufficient clamping force happening, because the backing plate is broken. Now, where do we go from here? Now, I could take the really cheesy approach and just redo whatever you know, gas station hero decided to fix this side, and just glue the whole thing on there in the hopes that that fixes it and that I never have to get into this ever again, because if I were to glue this whole thing on here the way I would do it, it would not be able to be disassembled in a non-destructive manner again. Or my hope is that I will be able to somehow reconstitute this little used to be a screw post over here, or maybe I can find some way of like gluing a machine screw on there upside down to kind of create a stud or something like that, and then use some longer hardware. So these are the screws that came. These are the screws that came out. I probably need something twice as long as that, I'm going to guess. that I could then still thread into the original mounts here and then just use a washer on the back of the backing plate here to apply some clamping force to the backing plate. So I need to go and dig through the hardware drawer and see what I have available to me in that regard, and figure out how I would manage to attach something to this little, used to be a screw post over here, in order to accomplish that part of it, and not have to ghetto rig the back of this with glue or wood screws or whatever else they'd used last time. But I'm gonna go do some digging, and I'll pick you guys up here in a minute once I figured out what I can do about this. So it's the following day, and I'm currently missing one of the first organized mountain drives of the post-apocalypse season here in Tennessee, but I am dedicated to finishing this project, so here we are. What I have just gotten back from is a rare excursion into society to go to a hardware store down the road and procure, among other things, some tiny threaded rod, so no head on this at all on either end, and some nylock nuts along with a couple of washers. That's because I decided to proceed with what I'm going to call the stud plan of attack here, which involves abandoning all of the original hardware, enlarging the screw holes, the original screw holes, or reconstituting the original screw holes, as the case may be, on the front of the switch panel, that plastic assembly, then gluing in the studs using the threaded rod before reassembling it, and then putting on the nylock nuts on the back side along with the washers to both keep tension, and with the nylock washers, or not, excuse me, washers, I keep saying washers, nylock nuts, preventing any future vibratory bids for freedom just by virtue of it being in a car and dealing with that kind of environment. So that's what we are going to attempt. Wish me luck. First, I used a soldering iron to reshape the top of the mangled boss and give myself a starting point for the drill. Then, starting with a smaller bit, I drilled a pilot hole to try and avoid cracking the fairly brittle plastic, before going back with the final bit size that would create a hole that should accommodate the threaded rod. I repeated this for the other two bosses. The middle one cracked a little, but I felt that was okay given I intended to glue the studs in versus relying on threading, so the crack would be fixed as a matter of course. I then inserted the studs and test fit the backing plate before gluing the studs in place with some foam-safe superglue. Once the glue dried, I mocked up the hardware for reference and cut the studs to length. I then reassembled everything and carefully tightened the nylock fasteners. The center stud started to rotate as the nylon engaged, but was then still firm in tension. So I changed course and used a normal nut, but followed that with a dab of thread locker just to be safe. Testing these switches after assembly, everything seemed to click nicely. Okay, we're back in the car. Let's see what gives. Plug 1. Plug number 2. I'm going to sort of set this loosely in place for now, just in case it doesn't work. I don't want to shove it all the way back in here and then have to pull it back out. And let's see what happens. Down is good. Up is a little sticky, but it does work. So We'll see if that loosens up over time, but for now, we're going to call it a job done, and at least I know what I'm doing if I have to get back into it to fix something further or replace the board down the road. So with a few hours effort over a couple of days and a little bit of ingenuity, I've been able to now save myself several $100s on what could have been a really pricey replacement part. I did look it up. From the factory, it's about $810, I think. The best I saw that I could do on eBay to replace it with a used part was $600 and some change. Considering I spent about $6 and some change on the little pieces of hardware that I needed to repair mine, I'm going to call it a win. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of the takeaways here, right? Are if it's already broken, no reason to not take a look at it and see what you can do. At the same time, maybe don't look at the price tag before you go taking a drill to something like that. But regardless, we seem to have met with some success, so I'm going to end the video and go for a drive. I'm Richard, this is Lap of the World, and I will see you guys in the next video, if not at the track.